Hey everybody, thanks so much for joining us here on 9 News Watch. I'm meteorologist Chris Bianchi and joined by 9 News meteorologist Cory Reppenhagen for a bit more of a detailed look at the NCAR Fire, some of the kind of broader context behind it, both meteorologically, climatologically, and also maybe kind of looking forward a little bit on it as well. Cory, I know you were out there. We talking here on Monday afternoon. I know you were out there on Monday morning up in Boulder. Kind of start things off, the big questions on, I think, a lot of people's minds is that Boulder has had more than 75 inches worth of snowfall since January the 1st. Snowiest start to a calendar year on record in Boulder, yet we end up with this dramatic wildfire on the fringe of town back on Saturday, on March the 26th. What caused that, and what, with that much snowfall, how does that happen?
Yeah, that's the question that was on everybody's minds when I was out there in Boulder. Even though it's been really pounded into everybody's head, really ever since the 2020 season, that it's wildfire season starts on January 1st and goes 12 months in Colorado. We all know that, but for some reason, with maybe this would be an exclusion, right? Because of all that snow, we've kind of built up this kind of thought in the back of our mind that good snow equals no wildfires, right? But that's not the case because we see how quickly the vegetation here in Colorado responds to the weather conditions. And when we're talking about fire weather conditions with very low humidities, above average temperatures, and then you add the winds on top of that, we see the fuels start to dry out. When we talk about fire fuels, we're talking about the vegetation that can be consumed by fire. And how this happened was all the key was the grass. Okay, so the firefighters call the grasses a 1 hour fuel. So that means after 1 hour after receiving moisture, or regaining humidity overnight, getting some rain, getting some snow, it only takes 1 hour for that fuel to dry out to the point where it's responsive. So you can have 74.5 inches of snow in 3 months, but if you haven't had any in the last hour, then you're ready for a fire. And that's what happened, because it hasn't officially been called to the point where the fire started, but it looks like it started in the grass, and it utilizes the grass to move throughout that 200 acres just there behind the NCAR Mesa lab. And then we saw the larger fuels like trees somewhat resist fire. We saw the fire kind of actually weaving through patches of snow, which is just crazy, finding avenues of dry grass to move around. And then once it gets to the trees, the heat from the grass fire can actually kind of raise the ignition temperature of the tree to the point where it can catch on fire as well. But we did see some trees, some large, conifer trees resist that fire a little bit. So, and then the trees that did catch on fire, the fire did even climb into the crowns of the trees, but it didn't move from tree to tree as readily, and the tree did not burn as quickly. So we did see the effects there of all that snow into the larger fuels, which has a higher water content because they're larger, and the water stays in those trees longer. So those can be like 1,000-hour fuels. So if you're talking about 42 days or so. So that's the snow that we've had have certainly impacted those fuels. So when I was out there this morning, I saw that there were still hot spots, they call them, just smoldering areas deep within the fire perimeter. They are very confident that they have stopped the fire from progressing outward, like adding more acreage to the perimeter. But the inside of the fire is what they need to put those hot spots out. And when I was down there, I know the winds have kind of calmed down in Boulder just a little bit over the last hour, but this morning at about 9, 10 o'clock, they were kind of getting up there. We had some 15, 16, 17 mile per hour gusts, and it was a very noticeable sustained wind. And so that those will keep the fire, those smoldering hot spots going for a little while. But the firefighters were not too concerned that we were going to get into a situation where they were going to escape the boundary of that perimeter, even though it wasn't officially 100% contained. But what they really want to do is just kind of get through this day, manage those hot spots, and then hope that the next storm system coming tomorrow will actually deliver a little bit of moisture on there, whether it be rain or snow or both.
Yeah, ideally, and of course, that's the we can't get enough precipitation, even with what you're mentioning with those 1 hour fuels, where you can get a lot of recent moisture, and it doesn't necessarily stop grass fires from potentially being able to form. I guess when I think of that, it does seem like we're still feeling the impacts of our historically dry final 6 months of 2021, right? Where from the end of, I believe it was the end of June through New Year's Eve, we basically got almost no moisture here in Colorado, or in the Front Range, I should say. We had basically no moisture, a historically dry stretch. And based on what you're saying about those 1 hour fuels, it feels like we're still feeling the impacts of that in the ability to ignite these fires so quickly.
Yeah, and I think with the 1 hour fuels, I think that another thing with those is that we're not in the green up yet, so it's pre-green up, and those grasses are dormant, and so they practically went dormant in September, late September, and they have not really been receptive to taking on moisture since then. But where I really noticed the carryover effect from those 6 dry months from July all the way through the end of December were the trees, because like I said, we did see the trees catch fire and spread a little bit from crown to crown, not wildly, but it did happen. And you would think that after 3 months of great snow in Boulder, if we had just average precipitation in October and November and December, you would think that those trees would be much more resistant to catching fire. And the fact that we did see just a little bit of heat from the grass raise the ignition temperature of the trees and then actually catch those trees on fire, you can kind of see that they're not completely full of moisture as they you would expect to be right after 3 months of very good snow in the Boulder area. So I think you're right. We definitely you can see the carryover effect from that long stretch. And it makes you wonder if the tap gets turned off here, which it probably will, once the summer ridge starts to build in, that this process is just going to start over again, but thankfully we did get that moisture that over the last 3 months. And one thing that the firefighters said today that moisture is helping them with is it's very noticeable in the soils and the top soils. And when they're trying to put out those hot spots, what they do is they kind of blend the burning coals and debris and ash into the ground and just kind of cycle it and till it and tip it over. They're seeing that those hot spots they're saying, to me, their incident commander, Brian Oliver, told me this morning that they're really having just some easy work of putting out those hot spots because the soil has so much moisture in it. So even though the grasses are completely dry, the soil does have that moisture in it.
So perhaps a little bit of good news there. And I know you kind of alluded to this a second ago, and I know this is an admittedly difficult, impossible to answer question, but how does this play out over the course of the next few months? Perhaps, let's say we assume average moisture through the rest of March and through April and through May, and we get into that summer ridge season, June, July, August, where we're getting 100-degree temperatures. or 90, 100-degree temperatures on a fairly regular basis. How does this play out? Are we going to be dealing with potential fire breakouts on a frequent basis now?
I think so. I'm concerned about that, and what we've seen. The trouble has in Colorado has never really been the either the precipitation deficit, or we're just dry. We're always dry on a good year, or at an average year. The Denver Metro gets about 14 inches of precipitation, so that's not a lot. That's never really been our problem. The problem that we've run into since the 2020 season, remember the 2019 2020 snow season was actually kind of decent. We had about average snowpack by the second week of April. And honestly, wildfire was not a huge concern going into the summer of 2020. The problem we run into, I think, is just the evaporation rate has just been completely insane since the summer of 2020, where the evaporative demand from the atmosphere just needs to pull so much more water out of the ground, the trees, the ground level air. It just takes so much moisture. And so I think if we get in a situation like we've had 2 years in a row now, the 2020 summer of 2020 and summer of 2021, where we have very long stretches of completely sunny days above average temperatures, where that evaporative demand is so high that it doesn't matter how much precipitation we've had over the winter. It doesn't matter how much snow is in the mountains. It doesn't matter how much snow we've had over the January through April period. The demand, that evaporative demand, has been so high that we get ourselves right back into that situation. And if you look at the long-term outlooks, from the Climate Prediction Center, when they do the 3-month outlooks, it's not particularly good news there, I don't think. When we're looking at getting past April, May, June, and July is not too promising for the West, honestly, from what those outlooks are showing. And so that, at least, that doesn't tell you exactly what's going to happen over the next 3 months, but it gives you something to work with. It gives you some probability, something to expect. And so I don't know. I just think that the evaporation is our problem here. It's not really the moisture. Let's say we had a really another miraculous April, like this continues, and so we have 2 inches above average. Is that really going to save you from a fire season? No. What's going to save you from the fire season, weather-wise at least, is to not have those really hot, dry days where the evaporative demand is so high and the fuels are not able to recover any moisture overnight.
Well, with that, especially in light of the high evaporative demand comments that you were just saying there a second ago, another hypothetical and impossible to exactly answer question for you. What is the potential role that a warming climate has had on increasing that evaporative demand and or on the string of recent fires that we've had in the Front Range over the last 6 months and even going back over the last 2 years?
Yeah, I think that is the key when you start to look at the climate and how that is changing. It's not as much as precipitation, although our precipitation is certainly down over the last few years. The temperature and the demand for it's a direct correlation. The atmosphere, if you're warming it by 1 degree C, you're increasing the availability that the atmosphere has to hold moisture. And so that moisture has to come from somewhere, right? And where it comes from is evaporation from the ground. And so our soils and our trees are just drying out so much faster. And so I think when it's kind of a complicated thing to try to pinpoint which parts of our problem is climate and which part is just just Colorado normals. But I think when you look at that, that's that's the key right there. Is this the you add you add heat to the atmosphere, you that's gonna increase the demand for water vapor, and the water vapor has to come from somewhere, and it's coming from the earth. So that it's direct. There's no question about it that the warming of the atmosphere has kind of led us down this path. And so it's just all part of the problem. And I like when we were doing the newscast this morning, I remember your comment about the fact that firefighters say that more than 80% of our wildfires are caused by humans. And so that actually kind of gives me hope a little bit, because that means there is this easy solution, and that is for us to clean up our act a little bit and not cause as many fires. You know what I mean? So I think when you talk about solutions, I think climate repair is definitely going to help. But what really is going to help is for ignitions not to happen, especially on days where the winds are going to be so strong. And we don't really have, I mean, I know the cause of the Marshall Fire is very still much up in the air about, if there were direct human mistakes or maybe infrastructure mistakes that led to that. We don't know about the NCAR fire, but we know there wasn't lightning. So there's that. I think if we can, we have. I mean, the solution is right there at our hands. I mean, if it's just a simple matter of cutting down the ignitions. You cut down the ignitions, you cut down the probability of there being a disastrous wildfire.
Well, I guess with that in mind, so for example, a day like today where there is increased wildfire risk, especially in southeastern Colorado, but there's some also here in the Denver area. What are some of those steps that we as individuals and kind of owning some of that individual responsibility, what can we do? You know, I say there's a red flag warning. I feel like that's in a sense sometimes it can be perceived as a little fatalistic. There's not much you can necessarily do in a lot of cases, but what can people do in that case other than perhaps some of the obvious things about not burning things outdoors? Are there any other steps that we can take?
Yeah, I think warning is a huge deal, because I mean we're human. We're not going to really say, oh, it feels kind of dry today and a little breezy, maybe I shouldn't do this or that. Maybe I shouldn't be burning slash in my backyard. Maybe I shouldn't be having a barbecue pit fire. But if there is a warning, and I know we've talked about this many times about the red flag warning, there's so many things that I think are wrong with that, and it starts with the name. Red flag warning. Let's have some control over warnings, so that when the National Weather Service is probably the best tool to distribute warnings like this, and if they have the ability to really reach people and say, not something vague like there's a red flag warning, humidities are low. It has to be more than that, I think, where we really have to say this is a day where fire weather is extreme, and any little thing you do can ignite a fire. And I think I think you know most of the problems that we've run into are come from vehicles or campfires or cigarettes. Those are the super easy ones to cut down. I know we've had prescribed burns get out of control before, but I think those are pretty minimal when it comes to how these things really get started when we're not expecting it to. And I think the borderline days are really important too. Like I think if you look at Boulder right now, they're down to 13% relative humidity. The winds are not too high. Temperatures getting up into the 70s. I mean, it could be, you could look at that and you look at those red flag conditions or criteria for the extreme fire weather, and it's right close. It's close. And so those are the days where, that some decisions could be made about, if I'm burning slash in my backyard, or whatever, just having a pit barbecue fire. These are the days where you think, yeah, if there if there was something more descriptive to tell people that this is a day that those things cannot fly, I think it would be more effective. So I think the warning system, I think, is huge, and I think we've had some ideas that might be able to change that. And I'm hopeful that, with our discussions with the National Weather Service, that we could be heading down that line.
That would certainly be probably good. And by the way, of note, neither the NCAR fire back on Saturday nor the Marshall fire back on December the 30th, neither day was there a red flag warning. That's not a commentary on the Weather Service. That is a commentary on the lack of tools, I suppose, they may have to issue some of that, because there's no, you were mentioning some of those more marginal days, there's no advisory level alert to issue the public in those cases.
Yeah, exactly. And it's such the criteria is, that you have to draw a line somewhere, right? Or else you just have
Mm-hmm.
red flag warnings every day, right? So you have to have criteria, but we're just always so close to that, where
Mm-hmm.
maybe just a more of a broader education, or maybe more penalties. I remember a fire a few years ago. I don't remember if it was Crystal Mountain or something like that up near Netherland, but it was a campfire that started that, and there was really never any harsh penalties, that come down. Maybe penalties. I mean, that seems to get our attention a lot, if we get in trouble for what we do. I think, the one down on Levita Pass a few years ago that was intentionally started, that person did receive some severe penalties. But I mean, just penalties for everything. I mean, if just throwing a cigarette out the window could come with some sort of penalty. I know technically there is a penalty available, but when do you ever hear of
Yeah.
that being taken seriously? So hard to enforce, but I think I think that would be an avenue that would get more attention. I mean, I don't know how many Marshall fires do we have to have before more than just a handful of people take it serious, about what you really can and can't do, in Colorado.
And to your point, to kind of round things on out, how close we came on Saturday to having maybe not quite a Marshall Fire level event, but I think we were saved. I think you mentioned it this morning as well. The winds kind of relaxed at the right time, and that just allowed firefighters enough time and space to really. What was it? The fire came within about a tenth of a mile of homes there in Boulder. I mean,
Yeah,
that
they're
close.
saying about a tenth of a mile. It looked like 500 yards for me when I was just looking at it. But if the fire was to able to get 500 more yards and get into, that neighborhood, the homes there were not tightly packed, but it was certainly a subdivision where there were many homes, and I don't know, it seems like we're very close to that
Mm.
situation. The Chat Ridge 2 fire a couple years ago, down in the Centennial Littleton Highlands Ranch area, that was so close. I mean, those flames came up. I mean, they were burning fences to the backyards of homes. So we've actually come very close to having Marshall Fire type incidents several times, and you can count this NCAR one in that bunch. So we get lucky. You know, we had a little wind shift. If the winds were 20 miles an hour faster on Saturday, or they lasted 2 hours longer, are we looking at a major incident or not? I don't know. We keep getting lucky.
And well, hopefully the luck is replaced by individual responsibility, I suppose, over the um, next few years. To your point there, but well, Cory, I want to round things out and thank you for your time and allowing us to kind of look back on the NCAR fire and also in the broader context of everything that's gone on in the last few months and years, and kind of put a bow on all of it and hopefully take away some lessons. So, Cory, really appreciate a few minutes of your time here.
Yeah, man, absolutely. Always happy to chat with you, and I think just discussion is good.
It is good. Meteorologist Cory Reppenhagen, thanks so much.
Yep. Take care, man.